Over social media here lately, I've been seeing news about the identity of Jack the Ripper being revealed after all these years. And it's all bullshit. They've been talking about that damn Shawl now for well over a decade. First of all, there's no chain of evidence. That's the first thing. Number two, the only thing the DNA reveals is that it has Aaron Kosminski's DNA on it, not that he was Jack the Ripper. Now, I talk a little bit about this in my book, Jack the Ripper, the Man Behind the Blade. In fact, I dedicate an entire chapter to the usual suspects. Kosminski has been a suspect for years, pretty much since the very beginning. So, Aaron Kosminski is another who is often associated with being Jack the Ripper. Kosminski was a Polish Jew who was named as a suspect in writing by Sir Melville Macnaghten, who was the Assistant Chief Constable of the London Metropolitan Police. Sir Robert Anderson, who had been Assistant Commissioner, stated the Ripper was likely a low-class Polish Jew. Researchers had learned that Kosminski did in fact live in Whitechapel at the time of the murders, and had even been admitted to Colney Hatch Asylum with paranoid schizophrenia, where he died a short time later. Kosminski had been identified by a witness to one of the Ripper crimes. However, the witness refused to testify because both he and the suspect were Jews, and there was an unwritten rule at the time that no Jew should willingly offer testimony against another, according to those who had contact with him in the asylum. Kosminski was described as being harmless, and it's thought that the extent of his mental illness involved him harming himself. That is literally everything on Aaron Kosminski. Now, being a counselor in training, working in the mental health industry, even for the short time that I have been at my placement site, I have been working primarily with individuals on the schizophrenia spectrum. The majority of, if not all of the individuals I've worked with are relatively harmless. Now, that isn't to say that some of them aren't, but for many on the schizophrenia spectrum, their minds are too chaotic to be able to perform a crime like this and get away with it. Even back then, they talk a lot. They go off on tangents. They will move from one topic to the next within a breath. Sitting in session with some on the schizophrenia spectrum, it's difficult to get a word in edgewise. So to sit here and say that Aaron Kosminski, someone who was a known schizophrenic, who had been admitted into a mental asylum, whose DNA was on a shawl found or that belonged to one of the victims, that's to say that he's the Ripper. It's just adding to stigma, really. You hear that someone has schizophrenia, and automatically you assume the worst about them. You identify them as a serial killer. And then just because their DNA is on a over 100-year-old shawl with no chain of evidence or anything, a witness who refused to testify, it adds a lot of doubt. Now, in my book, I do have my own theory. A lot of people across the pond have denounced my theory as laughable. I don't care. It's a theory. That's all these are, is theories. We will never know exactly who Jack the Ripper was because of a lack of chain of evidence, because of poor record keeping, because Evidence was destroyed, even. The writings on the wall outside of one of the murders was washed away by a police officer before it could be photographed, even. So to say that the identity of Jack the Ripper has been revealed after 137 years is laughable. And then to say that DNA analysis linked blood from a shawl that belonged to one of the victims to a schizophrenic who others are reported to have confirmed was a very peaceful, good-natured person. He was just odd, is also laughable. To say that that individual is Jack the Ripper. Serial killers very rarely fall on the schizophrenia spectrum. There are a few. I will say there are a few. But the ones who get away with it for any amount of time generally aren't, because their minds are so chaotic, because the neurotransmitters in their minds are constantly firing off, leading to voices, leading to visual hallucinations, leading to unstable processes of information. Aaron Kosminski, even though the identity of Jack the Ripper will never be solved, and I mean ever, I can wholeheartedly say Aaron Kosminski was not Jack the Ripper.